It's like grace, but married to a sense of accountability. So it's grace in that I'm not giving up on you. But part of that not giving up on you is that I'm not going to leave you in this condition. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not giving up on you, but that doesn't mean you keep doing the same thing over and over.
One of the reasons why I wrote the book was I thought I was writing it to the business community out there. Now, it turns out a lot of nonprofit folks have read it and like it and all. But the message is that it's not just at this nonprofit Homeboy Industries with a Jesuit priest that you can be constantly loving, trusting, giving. A lot of people have read Father Greg's book, Tattoos on the Heart. So you read the book, you had some of your staff read the book, and then for the last 4 years, you've been a Homeboy, being a board member. What would you say to people who've read the book about how it lives out every day in the hallways and rooms of Homeboy?
Yeah, I would say the book doesn't even do it justice.
Homeboy can lift people out of poverty, then other businesses should be able to help.
Money may not be the answer to everything, but I guarantee you give people enough money, everything else becomes much more easier to solve.
All right, Michael, thanks for being our first guest on the Homeboy Way Podcast.
Oh, what an honor. The first one. Okay, no pressure.
No, I figured you were the right one I want to talk to you because early on these podcasts, I've been trying to shine a light on the struggles of the poor of our community. And I know you've been heavily invested in talking about ending poverty in California. And additionally, you're a Homeboy board member.
Absolutely.
You've been on the Homeboy board for 4 years.
Wow.
So let's start there. Why'd you join the Homeboy board?
Since my time in Stockton as a city council person, well, even before that, as a college student at Stanford, I remember my senior year, I spent time for one of my final projects researching the most effective interventions for poverty and for gang and gun violence. And of course, Homeboy Industries came up, Harlem Children's Zone came up, et cetera. So I spent the whole quarter just researching and reading and figuring out, okay, what's the secret sauce? How does it work? And can this model be replicated in places like Stockton? And then when I was a city council person and mayor, spent a lot of time talking about how do we build a Homeboy Industries type model in Stockton? How do we take some of the principles and apply it to our local context? And in fact, when I was mayor, I had my gang unit and the folks over our violence interruption efforts read Tattoos on the Heart as we thought about how we were going to interrupt cycles of violence in Stockton. So I've been a big Homeboy fan for a long time. So when I moved to Los Angeles and the opportunity presented itself, it's funny because before I came to meet with you all, my wife was like, don't sign up for anything else. You don't have space. We just had another kid.
Yeah.
We just moved to LA. But then when I told her it was Homeboy, she's like, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
More,
yeah,
right?
That makes sense. You can add Homeboys to the list. And it's been one of the best parts of being in LA, actually, is being able to be a part of the leadership and the governance of an organization that I have so much respect for.
Yeah. Well, good. So you said a lot in that answer. So I want to roll that backwards a little bit. So you're mayor of Stockton, and you were at 26 years old.
26.
Which you were then the youngest mayor of any big city in America.
Ever, yeah.
Which is impressive in itself. So tell me why you took that step as a young person that, hey, I'm gonna get in there and be a mayor of a city. Well,
actually, to answer that question is actually in one of the principles that I think Homeboy really embodies, this idea of proximity. I decided to run for mayor of Stockton, and before that, city council. Just because I'm from Stockton, but from sort of the other side of the tracks, the south part of the city, the part of the city with the highest poverty rates and the highest violence. Number two, my father is still incarcerated. I'm 35 years old now. He's been incarcerated for the last 34 years. And then when I was interning in the White House in college, working with mayors and council members, my cousin was murdered in Stockton. And that sort of pain, that grief, that anger, but also that curiosity in terms of, is this the best we can do? Is this inevitable? Is the leading cause of death for Black, Latino, and Southeast Asian young men just going to be gun violence forever? Is there nothing we can do about that? Right. That question and those experiences led me to run. And then when I was on city council for 4 years, it just showed me that government can work, that things can happen, that change is possible, but it doesn't just happen. Like you have to force it. You have to push it. I didn't study much science, but I think Newton's first law of motion applies directly to government. This idea that an object at rest tends to stay at rest, inertia, unless an unbalanced force comes and forces it to move. And I saw in city council, things were happening because I was that unbalanced force, because It wasn't just theoretical to me because I just felt like we had to do something. We weren't just up there to go to chicken dinners. So then I ran for mayor with this idea that Stockton didn't have to be bankrupt. Stockton didn't have to be the most miserable city. Stockton didn't have to be the least literate city. That those may describe where we were now, but we can always get better. And it would take someone to kind of force and push us. So that's why I decided to run.
Yeah. What I love about you being a Homeboy board member is you're always willing to help out. And oftentimes at Homeboy, as we try to solicit government funds, we met that government at rest. And you've been good about kind of being that force to help push an idea along. How were you able to make that work as a city council member and then as mayor? And did you find resistance in the structure?
Yeah, what I learned early on as a council member, it was the same amount of effort to do small things as it was to do big things.
Sure.
I remember when I was trying to get the school district to allow vetted, fingerprinted mentors on the school campuses because the principal said we need mentors for our young people. And it took a year. That was a small thing.
Right.
It took the same amount of time to open a health clinic that had been vacant in my district, which is much more difficult. So I just learned as a council person that to get government to do anything, it takes the same amount of energy, the same amount of follow through, and the same amount of push. So you might as well swing for the fences.
Yeah,
you might as well go for what you really want because you're probably not going to get there, but you'll get closer. And then I also learned the importance of listening. And that part of the issue with government, in my opinion, aside from the fact that it tends to not want to move, it's not because everybody who works in government is bad or everyone who's in government doesn't want to move or even the person who's blocking it is just a blocker. But I learned that oftentimes in building relationships and asking questions and trying to understand why something is the way it is, it creates sort of room for movement. It creates space for folks to kind of be a little bit courageous in actually trying to do something. And then I also learned that, conflict is part of the game. People are going to get upset. People are going to feel uncomfortable. People may get annoyed. And that's just part of the game. That's part of what's required to get anything to get done. And those lessons helped me when I was mayor because I was like, okay, look, there's a lot of things we have to do. I remember one of the biggest internal city government conflicts I had was when I went to bring the Advanced Peace Gun Violence Interruption Program to the city, married with our existing ceasefire efforts. Friends were mad in the city government. My city manager.
Because they thought it was an indictment on their current program?
It was they took everything so personal.
Yeah,
and I was like, well, you guys, it's not about you. It's about this murder rate that hasn't moved the way it needs to. It's about the fact that we have a crisis, so we need to add capacity. Your office in and of itself, even if it was working 100% well, is not enough to deal with the amount of gun violence we have in this community. So let's bring something else in. But it took a lot of political capital, a lot of meetings, a lot of arguments, a lot of hurt feelings I had to smooth over afterwards. But it was worth it because that year we had a 40% reduction in homicides, and a 30% reduction in shooting. The next year, same thing. And those were the only 2 years, 2018 and 2019, in this whole century since 2000, with population growth, that Stockton had less than 40 homicides. And for me, that's just, I always think of that because
it's a great example.
Took a lot. And it made people uncomfortable.
Well, and part of it was being courageous. People who read my book, The Homeboy Way, or people who know me hear my frustrations with government. And I just want to say, and you said it right there, it's not because I think they're bad people. And they do want to do a good job. They do want to help people who are poor and disenfranchised. It's just that the system, the bureaucracy, the rules, everything sort of gets in the way that causes that lack of inertia.
And I think people think so much about themselves. I'm always reminded of Dr. King's last sermon before he was assassinated, when he's in Memphis for sanitation workers. He was speaking about the Good Samaritan, and he talks about how everyone else who saw the man on the side of the road in the story thought, if I help, what happens to me? And the Good Samaritan was the only person that said, if I don't help, what happens to the man? And I think oftentimes folks in leadership, folks in government, so much of the focus is on self. Like, how do I protect my job, my status, my power? If we try this and it doesn't work, what happens to me? If we try this And it doesn't go as well. What happens to me versus like, no, if we don't change something, if we don't make things better, what happens to all the people I want to serve? So I think the job of leadership actually, particularly in government, is to get people to think less about themselves and more about sort of the people or the problem that brought them to the job in the first place.
Exactly right. And it's being there for your, not just your constituents, but really people who are disenfranchised and people don't have a voice. And the elected officials sort of get it. It's sort of also the career workers who sort of worry more about themselves as well. Also in your intro, you said you asked your gang intervention unit to read Father Greg's Tattoos on the Heart. So what was the dialogue? Did you have a book club afterwards? What was the dialogue like?
Actually, I should rephrase it, because the truth is they were in my office and they saw the book. And the head of our unit said, can I borrow this? He was like, just borrow books from our office sometimes. I'm like, sure, you can borrow it.
Yeah.
So then he read it. And then he's the one that made everyone who worked in our gun violence and gang intervention program read the book. And he gave it to the police chiefs to read as well. I mean, they loved it. Like, it was so they come in and was like, this is interesting stuff. Like, they were like so enamored or so curious about this new way of looking at people and like having more examples of redemption in stories and thinking about like, yeah, we need to have more linkages to jobs. And just thinking about sort of their role, not as just enforcers, but as connectors. Because everyone, or a lot of people like police. If the cops call, like, I need this, folks will do it. So it was great for the work we were doing when it wasn't just me saying, let's give these guys not even a second chance. For oftentimes, it's a first chance. Let's give these guys a chance. Yeah. But it was even better when the police chief and the gang unit and the lieutenants were like, no, these are our guys. We want them to be free. We want them to be alive. Can we make sure that they're prioritized for resources? And they created a whole culture shift in the city about like how we saw folks who were both victims and perpetrators of violent crime.
Oh, that's right.
Right?
Yeah. So a lot of people have read Father Greg's book, Tattoos on the Heart. So you read the book, you had some of your staff read the book, and then for the last 4 years, you've been a Homeboy, being a board member. What would you say to people who've read the book about how it lives out every day in the hallways and rooms of Homeboy?
Yeah, I would say the book doesn't even do it justice, right? Because when you read something on paper, it's easy for it to be idealized, or it's easy to be like, okay, like that just is that's beautiful prose. But it's not real. But when you see it every day and you hear it, it's like, wow, like even those words on the pages aren't enough to really explain the radical kinship, the real love, the sort of true dignity that's felt and experienced, true redemption that's felt and experienced here. And I think particularly leaving, I always joke, leaving from Stockton, where I had a church I went to every Sunday, to being in LA, which is young kids have not just now beginning to find like where our spiritual home will be. But I always tell people it was Homeboy. I just go to Homeboy. Yeah, sure. I just go to Homeboy. And for me, it's been like church. It's been a real example of love in action, of redemption in action, this idea that nobody's a throwaway person, that no one's irredeemable, and also that no one's perfect, and that we all fall short, and that we all need help, and that grace is something we all need. It's not it shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a right. Like you should, and I'm always just impressed with the ways in which when we have our retreats, how everyone on staff can point to a moment where Father Greg or someone else said something to them that shifted their perspective and changed their lives. I remember last year, I was like, Father Greg, like, how do you know what to say? He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, every retreat, some person says you said something pivotal to them on like a very important day in their life. And half the time you probably don't remember that you even said these things. And he starts laughing. And he's like, I just do my best to stay present and proximate, and just be in the moment. And I think that's also something I've learned from being in Homeboy. It's like even when working on big structural things, it starts with the individual. Like you can't lose sight of the individual. And that you have to be present. Like there could be a million things happening. Important things. But right now, the most important thing is this person in front of you, this problem in front of you. And if you do that, you're able to sort of, I think, respond or speak or say things in a way that like shifts people's perspectives and really changes things.
Yeah, well, really well said. And look, as I say to many people, it's not like that's a unique idea or that Greg discovers something new. It's just that it gets practiced and it's part of a mindset. And so, again, one of the reasons why I wrote the book was I thought I was writing it to the business community out there. Now, it turns out a lot of nonprofit folks have read it and like it and all. But the message is that it's not just at this nonprofit Homeboy Industries with a Jesuit priest that you can be constantly loving, trusting, giving, but you can bring it back in my world to the business world. So talk to the world you were from, what government, elected officials, can they actually live those values you just talked about?
Well, particularly given the moment we're in now, we have to. Like, that is the path back, right? We have to look at people not as problems, but as potential solutions, right? We have to design policy in a way where we're not trying to punish, but to allow people to flourish. Where we're not afraid of people, but we're afraid of people not reaching their potential. I think this is a whole paradigm shift that has to happen in the way we see people, particularly people who are different than us, or people who grew up differently than us, or people who look differently than us. And then I also think we have to, it's like grace, but married to a sense of accountability. So it's grace in that I'm not giving up on you, but part of that not giving up on you is that I'm not going to leave you in this condition. Like, I'm not giving up on you, but that doesn't mean you keep doing the same thing over and over.
Let me add a third thing to that: grace, accountability of ourselves, and then investment into people.
And then give people a real shot, right? Like give people the tools to change. Absolutely. I think those three things are important, because I know when people hear grace, they think, oh, it's just keep going, keep failing. And it's like, no, like, just know that there's room for failure. And there's grace and tools to help folks succeed. And part of that grace is also insisting that, no, you can do better. Like, no, I see what you can do. Like, I know this is not all you are. And I'm going to keep pushing you to get there. I'm not going to just leave you in this state. I'm not going to give up on you in that way either, which is, if not just as destructive, almost as destructive as the other extreme of saying, well, you're worthless. I want nothing to do with you.
Sure. So let's get more focused on poverty, right? And so I say this a lot in front of business audiences all the time. And I say, what's remarkable to me about Homeboy, one of the remarkable items of Homeboy is that we help people, gang members, serious violent offenders, we help them heal from their trauma. We help them heal enough to be resilient to take on what society throws at them. And we're able to also, give them job skills, and we're able to essentially lift them out of poverty. And so if Homeboy can lift people out of poverty, then other businesses should be able to help. And to me, it's about jobs.
Yeah.
Give the working poor a job along the way. Poverty rate in America has been the same for 50 years, around 12%. And so my perspective is, trying to get the business community to help out. And so you've been leading the organization, Epic, and you want to talk about that and how you feel government can help people lift out of poverty.
After my time as mayor, I realized that so much of the backlash and so much of the conflict I experienced was because I exercised a preferential option for the poor. I just thought that part of our job as government is to make sure we center those who have nothing.
Which, by the way, if Greg was here, he would say, yes, we discriminate. We discriminate to help people. Be preferential to people who need help.
Yeah.
Right.
So then I was thinking about California, the fourth largest economy in the world, but the fourth largest economy for who? And so many people are in poverty, the highest effective poverty rate in this country. But it's not like there's like political infighting. Everything is one party. So what's the issue? So that's why I started End Poverty in California. So that the name will be a provocation. Like, can we do it? Like, yes, we can. And B, just get on a series of inquiry. Like, why is the poverty rate in California so high? And what can we do about it? And to your point, I think government's role, is to ensure that business is in an environment where it can thrive and provide jobs. And when that happens, also hold business accountable for a minimum standard of pay for folks. so that folks aren't working and poor. Like the idea of the working poor is such a ridiculous notion to me, particularly in the country that prides itself on this idea of work and dignity. And it's like, well,
a job should lift people up out of being poor.
You have the working poor. You have people who are working who are homeless. You have people who are working and still hungry. So like, what are they working for? Like what are we doing? So I think government has to be the person that calls the question. Like, yes, opportunities, we need opportunity. Folks want to work, want to contribute. And how do you make sure those jobs pay wages so that folks aren't still needing government subsidies while working at Walmart, for example, or aren't needing government subsidies? Or, for example, I just was with SCIU 2015, and I was shocked to find that about it's either 60 or 80% of IHSS workers and home care workers with important work only make $16.50 an hour. So they're also like taking care of sick and the elderly and folks, but also still in poverty. And also still to rely on government assistance.
Yeah. Just not right.
It's like, so I think government, that's the job of government. And then B, one of the things I did when I was in Stockton.
Hopefully your example explains this, but that's the job of government to do what?
The job of government to set the rules, to set the floor. So I keep telling people, it's not about ceilings. We don't need to talk about ceilings until we talk about floors. So let's set the floor. What's the baseline standard of living that no one should go underneath? Anyone, and particularly people who are like working, like that makes no sense that we have so many people who are working, who are homeless, who are sleeping in cars, who are couch surfing, who are in our shelters, who are working and still have to rely on
So that's one policy, to set the floor.
Yeah.
What about, so were you about to talk about universal basic income?
Yeah.
I want to chat with you about that one too.
Yeah, so when I was mayor of Stockton, because of the issue of poverty in the city, in Stockton, 33% of our kids were in poverty, about 25% of the city, but the other 20 to 30% of the city were one paycheck away. So I was like, this is not just like a fringe issue. This is a lot of folks in our city. And I was like, well, what can government do to combat poverty? And that was a question I posed to my staff. They came back with a bunch of proposals. And then they were like, well, you can also just give money. I was like, what? Show me examples of where this has happened. And they told me about examples in Kenya, Mexico, and Brazil with cash transfers. And then I remember studying Dr. King in college, and that fact that he talked about a guaranteed annual income paid at the national median income, so much more than a supplement. And I was like, yeah, what happened to that idea? So we did more research. I was like, okay, I don't know if it was going to work, but I do know poverty isn't working. So let's test it. Let's try it. And we saw, not just in Stockton, but LA, we've done 2 pilots here. We've done over 60 pilots across the country. And consistently, the data says that cash isn't a panacea for everything, but it is a panacea for not having cash. When you give folks money, they're able to move from part-time to full-time work because it costs money to go to work. It costs money to get your uniform clean. It costs money for childcare. It costs money to get your car fixed. It costs money for gas. If you don't have those things, you can't go to work. So then you're unemployed. It's a vicious circle. We found that it had positive mental health and physical health impacts because if you're not stressed, if you're not anxious, if you know that at least the bare minimum will be paid every month, you're able to breathe and sleep and your cortisol levels go down, which is good for everyone. And what was the question? I'm just talking now. Well,
universal basic income.
Yeah. So I think that's another policy that government has to, particularly in the age we're entering into with AI and possible disruption automation. It's like, hey, government can't give people enough money to not work, but there has to be a floor so that folks are able to supplement what they make and that folks are able to pay for not luxuries, but basic necessities.
Yeah. No, we definitely see Homeboy, the effects of money on people. And from very early on in Greg's time of helping people out, it's always just handing money without restrictions, right? Just trusting people are going to do the right thing. And just as you said, if people are hungry, they can't work on their own mental health. If they don't have clothes, they can't get to work. If they don't have transportation, they can't get to the doctor if they can find a doctor. And so we give a lot of money out, and we do it in our way of sort of understanding what their life's about, and we give as much as we can. And so I chuckle oftentimes in the press when people critique universal basic income. And I'm not sure if anybody's hit them on the right formula yet, but I chuckle over folks thinking that money doesn't help people who are in poverty.
It's so wild to me.
Of course it helps people. So I say this all the time, the donors, that the wealthy people in our society have this thought of, money doesn't solve problems. I'm saying, but if you're poor, money solves a fair amount of problems. Not all the problems, but a fair amount.
And I tell people at worst, money makes problems more solvable.
Yes,
that's right. Money may not be the answer to everything, but I guarantee you, you give people enough money, everything else becomes much more easier to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've dedicated your life so far to public service. Is that thought, did you think you were going to do that as a young person? And do you feel like you're going to stay in public service going forward?
Yeah, I really think it's more of a sense of like calling or purpose. Because, there's a lot of stuff I enjoy actually doing a lot more. But I just think from a young age, I've always felt like a fire for justice. I've always been passionate about things should be fair, that folks have opportunity. I've always been someone who has questioned, like, why are things the way they are? That's since my earliest memories are about arguing with teachers over a grade or standing up for someone who's being bullied. That's just always been part of who I am. And I think as I've gotten older and some of the experiences that I've had from early trauma to sort of some of the immense privileges I've enjoyed since, it's given me, I think, a real unique set of experiences to do this work. And then politics is crazy. And I just think I'm like particularly maladjusted where I could deal with the crazy, where when we have I get it. Mm-hmm. I remember even some of the things we've talked about, I'm do this. Instinctually, I just understand how to move in it. So because of that, I think that's a skill that has to be used. But particularly after losing re-election, I've also come to the realization that purpose isn't tied to position, right? So I am willing to be in elected office if that feels like the right position or the right place to be to accomplish the goals. But the past 4 years have taught me that, no, you can be in public service and not be in politics. Like in poverty in California, Marriage for Guaranteed Income. I've produced social impact documentaries. I've invested in companies trying to solve problems. So I've learned that there's a whole bunch of ways to make an impact. Yep. I've served on boards. So I know for sure that for the rest of my life, I'll be doing that type of work. And then I think at some junctures in my life, maybe elected office is in the cards, but I'm not wedded to being like an elected official for the next 50 years. Yeah. In fact, if that's the case, I would view it as a failure. Like, you can find nothing else to do for 50 years. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I've loved having 2 chapters of my professional career, right? The business side and now on the homeboy side. And it's been fulfilling. And I encourage others to think about multiple chapters as well. I want to go back to a little bit what you were saying. Think about if I can ask you to reflect on the arc of your life, right? And so you grew up in tougher circumstances. Were able to go to an elite university, become a mayor, ran in more elite circles. I had relationship with folks there, and you're making an impact with what you do every day now. And so from your parents to you to now your children, what advice, I know they're young at this point, but if they were not young, if they were 15-year-olds right now, what would you be saying to them?
Yeah, I kind of started brainwashing them early. So it's really a couple things. My wife and I both tried to really instill in them. Number one, one of the biggest lessons I learned from my family, despite what we lacked, was that I was better than no one, but no one was better than me. That every room I walked into, I belonged. I earned it. I should be there. They're lucky I'm there. And just make sure my kids know that. Number two, because their lives are so radically different than mine was at their age and probably will continue to be so. Just reminding them that they don't have to apologize for the privileges that they will enjoy, that they haven't earned, that they were born into, but they have to put purpose to it. Like, you don't need to feel sorry that your parents have been quote unquote successful. But you don't have to be sorry that your dad's not in jail, that you're not in poverty, that you're not hungry, that you're not hearing gunshots, that you have access to some of the most interesting people and some of the best experiences. But with that just comes a responsibility. They're not going to tell you what to do, but do something. And do something that helps other people and recognize that what you enjoy that you haven't earned, there's a whole bunch of other kids who are just as worthy as you, who won't have it. So find a way to be a part of fixing that. Talk to them about that stuff now. Mm-hmm. And then number 3, we were, for some reason, especially my oldest son, but they're all, my oldest son is fascinated by Old Testament stories. Mm-hmm. Like he's always asking me Old Testament stories. So the other day, we were talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they were told to bow to the idol and they said no and they were thrown in the furnace. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that. And it was a good sort of reminder or a good first lesson to them that, like, particularly in the world we live in now, and maybe the world they'll enter in as adults, that there'll be all these false idols and false gods that will require them to like pledge allegiance to say like, I support this, or I'm with this, or bow to this. And that to be a good person, a moral person, a righteous person, you don't bow. Even if it means you're going to be in a fire, because it's not that you won't be in the fire, but even in the fire, you'll have help.
Sure.
So just teach them that now. Like, you don't have to conform. You don't have to bow. And then lastly, something to be happy. Take up space. Have some joy. Enjoy life. Like, be loving. Be kind. That's our favorite thing to say. Like, we're not mean people.
Yep.
Every time in our house, we're not mean people. Like, in here, we don't do that. We're nice. We're kind. We look out for people. We help people. So those lessons. And then lastly, the last lesson I hope to impart, we're trying to teach them now, is this idea that it's okay to fail. Like, you don't have to be perfect. You're not perfect, actually. That you're going to mess up. That things are going to be hard. You might not understand something. You might not be the best at something to start. But if you work hard, if you practice, if you put in the time, then you'll get better. But you don't have to start perfect. Like, you're not going to be the best at everything. Sure. Like, that's just, sometimes you'll lose, especially my oldest. My mom says he's like me, but I don't know if I was a spat. Like, if he lose, he's getting better though. But before, like last year, if he lost anything, it was like not even a small cry, it's a huge.
So that competitiveness is you pass down.
Right. But now he'll take a loss. He'll still be a little bit upset.
Yeah.
He might shed tear. But now he's like, what can I do better? Mm-hmm. Or now he'll practice, or now he'll try to learn. And that's been just great to watch.
That's great. They're great lessons. The middle one there, you're talking about moral and understanding that. When I talk to kids leaving college and they ask for advice, I say, find your moral compass, discover that, because whatever your career is going to be in the business world and government, you're going to be challenged. Your morals are going to be challenged. And if you have your own compass in place, then you can stand up for what's right.
Especially it's tough because when you see people who don't have the same moral compass winning.
Yes, that's right. Exactly right.
What am I doing this for?
Exactly right.
Because even today I have to ask myself, like, man, like, I believe this is the right thing, but it seems like the people doing the wrong thing seem to be having some momentum,
for sure,
having some success, seem to be winning. And it's a reminder that the arc of the moral universe is long. Like, it's just maybe in the moment, but over the long term, over 50 years, over a life, doing the right thing does pay off. Even in the moment, it looks like wrongdoers are in the lead.
Yeah. Another question about Homeboy. You've been around us long enough. What advice, if you were talking to folks who run nonprofits, what advice would you give them after your experience here at Homeboy?
Yeah, I don't know how you guys do it, because it's a mix of like rigor and vibes, but almost like the perfect mix, right? Like, there has to be some structure. Like, things can't just be like that doesn't work. But it can't be over structure where it stifles like innovation, spirit, and like humanity.
Right.
So I guess that would be the advice. It's like, find that balance between like structure, which is important, but structure in service of what? Like not structure for structure's sake, but structure to allow for the humanity and innovation and the spirit to flourish and to grow and to scale, number one. Then number two, which I really appreciate about Homeboy, is you have to build a broad coalition. Bring in unlikely allies. Bring in folks that you wouldn't think care about your issue, or maybe start off not caring about your issue, but care about the person who works.
Sure.
But you have to enlarge your tent. It can't just be you and all the people who think about the world in the exact same way as you do. And I've really admired sort of the diversity of thought on the board, the diversity of perspectives, diversity, like everyone's coming to here from a different point. I think that just shows the power of the work.
Right.
Because the mission doesn't change. Like the work doesn't change. Like
how we help people is the same. There's still more clients coming in. Yeah, it's about kinship and love.
Despite who's on the board. Like, and I think that's so powerful. It's like, you could have folks who may not agree with you on every issue, but who agree with you on this issue. And you don't have to change who you are as an organization to bring other people in who could be helpful and bring in other skills, other networks, and other folks that maybe weren't in your toolkit originally. And then I would tell people, I think you've been a good model of this. You have gems, you have talent, you have brilliance right in the organization, on your staff, in your clientele, and the people you're trying to serve. And your job is to help cultivate and grow that. You don't always have to look outside. You don't always have to bring in like a lot of the answers are inside, actually. And they might be in the service line, or they might be starting out as a coordinators. But future leadership is there, so being very intentional about leadership development and making it so that the folks who are receiving services, when they are able to provide them.
Yeah, I think Homeboy's been a great example of that, where people who just come into the program and are just struggling, but they find their self-worth, and then you can just see them flourish. But it takes years for them to kind of move up, which is fine, but it's a long-term investment to people that will make a difference in the organization.
And that's the other thing I was surprised by, actually. I was surprised by how many of the leaders with the good jobs are former Homeboy clients.
Right.
Like I'm not seeing many organizations where that's true.
Yeah.
Like the folks who are helping design, deliver, and lead.
Well, now 2/3 of our management team are folks who are former clients, and it takes two things. It takes intention. You got to do it. You got to be at it. And then you have, for us, we got to find donors who are willing to allow us to sort of have a little bit extra fat on our management team in terms of duplicative effort to teach people the jobs. But I think
it also speaks to what's so special about Homeboy, which is probably the most important thing for nonprofits to learn, how you see your clients, how you see your partners, I should say. We don't see them as charity cases, as folks with no value, as folks we are here to save. You see them as future leaders, like folks who are going to help run this thing, folks who have the solutions, and that's reflected. Like 2/3. Every time I hear that stat, I get excited because that just speaks to how you see folks.
Yeah.
And you see folks as equal partners and as leaders.
Yeah. And particularly we see folks who they are today. I go out of my way, never or rarely ask people about their past. Just who you are today, what you want to do, how do you need help, and how that moves forward. And that makes a difference.
That's a big lesson too, just for that right there.
Right. We were chatting a little bit outside, and sometimes we feel like the world's on fire around us, but you mentioned you're still hopeful. How do you hang on to that hope in today's world?
My kids give me so much hope, and the fact that you still see pockets of resistance. You still see folks who are the Homeboy Alley. Great example. At a time of ice raids, a time of great fear of gathering in public, particularly if you look a certain way or come from a certain place. But to still have this like alley where folks can come in community and gather and get help and get services, get cash, that gives me hope that folks haven't given up. Because when you look at the arc of history, we're only here today because folks in much darker times, in much more dire circumstances, didn't give up. And they tried and I keep reflecting on this thought, like our history is one of people trying things without knowing that they would work. And I think so much of history is taught as if things were inevitable. Yeah. But there was nothing inevitable about anything, from independence to emancipation to voting rights, like all those things. The folks that helped make them happen, they were just trying stuff out. They were like, I think this might work.
And they were willing to think big.
Yeah, I think this might work. And even if it doesn't work, the status quo is so untenable, I have to do something. So that gives me a lot of hope. And then when I was in South Africa in college, I spent a lot of time, and that was like the first time I can recall being like depressed because it was such a beautiful country, but such real problems. Like it was like, wow, like how's it gonna work? And I remember one particular night going to bed feeling really sad, like God, like I don't know, like I thought the ANC had changed all this stuff, but then I woke up and across the street, it was like my alarm didn't wake me up. It was a bunch of kids playing soccer, like yelling and screaming. And that was so inspiring to me. I'm like, wow, these kids have to live here. I'm leaving in 2 months. These kids have to live here. And they're playing, laughing, having fun, despite all the drama. Like they're hopeful that they'll have a future, that they don't need to worry about that now. So who am I not to be? So that's what gives me the most hope. Actually, the fact that my kids and other kids are still playing, still laughing, still having fun, because they just believe that that the future is not something that they should fear, that the future is not one that's going to be dark and scary for them, that the future is going to be a place worthy of them, and that they're counting on us with the agency and the power to try some things to make sure it's better.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say about South Africa, because we were just there on vacation last month, and in Cape Town, I left after 4 days feeling down. But also, I did observe what you just said, but while really hard circumstances for people there, and it's still a tough spot, but people still were able to find joy. And coming full circle, as I talk about Homeboy and talk about the people we serve and people who unfortunately live in poverty, they're still able to find joy. And that should be a lesson for all of us, that if you're balanced and you know God loves you, life moves forward, and that's where the hope is.
And just as previously, but to your point, what I realize more and more the older I get is that pessimism is actually a luxury. Like it's a real luxury to like, oh, nothing's going to change, because you're fine. If your if your world's on fire, if you're under duress because you think ICE is coming to deport you or people you love, if you don't know if your rent's going to be paid, if you're hearing gunshots at night, you have to believe there's something better. You have to believe that things are going to change. You can't be pessimistic. It's a luxury, because when you're actually experiencing the things, the only thing you have is resolve and agency and hope and determination that this is going to get better. So that's what gives me hope as well. It's like, I just know that being pessimistic is such a luxury. Like, oh, the world's on fire. As I go to my house and my kids play in the backyard and then go to school. Like, really, guy? Like, no.
Sure.
You have to be hopeful.
Well said. Well, Mike, I just want to I appreciate you being on this podcast. I appreciate the work you do with Homeboy, and I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you. I appreciate you and Homeboy.
Thank you.
Thank you.